Welcome to Yahoo Finance Sports Report, a unique look at the business of sports, brought to you by Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano, and I'm here to coach you through the financial game. Today, we've got Yahoo Sports senior writer Dan Wolken coming on the show to discuss the latest news at the U.S. Open, and Sara Myer, Chief of Staff and Strategy at Indiana Sports Corp, to discuss how big cities like Indianapolis are attracting major sporting events. Let's huddle up and get right into it. We're kicking off this week with Pomp's Playbook, where I take a look at some of the biggest headlines in sports that you and your portfolio need to know. Let's kick things off with college football. After a long offseason and plenty of storylines, week one of the college football season is officially in the books, and let's just say people were ready for it. The viewership numbers for the Texas and Ohio State game last Saturday aren't out yet, but ESPN says that Lee Corso's final show for College Game Day was the show's most watched episode ever at 3.5 million viewers. UNC even had celebrities like Michael Jordan, Lawrence Taylor, and Mia Hamm in attendance for Bill Belichick's disappointing season opener in Chapel Hill. Next up, fantasy sports and betting company Underdog announced this week that it is partnering with Crypto.com to launch sports prediction markets on its platform. Underdog is one of the fastest growing sports companies ever, on track to do about $500 million in revenue this year, in just the company's 5th year of operation. Although the platform initially made headlines as a fantasy sports player, Underdog is now the first sports gambling company to have fantasy sports, traditional sports betting, and prediction markets all in one place. Speaking of sports betting, a new report from the American Gaming Association says that NFL fans will legally wager a record $30 billion this season, up 8.5% from last year. FanDuel and DraftKings remain the most popular online sports betting platforms, but rivals such as BetMGM, Caesars, and even Robinhood and Kalshi are fighting for market share. But the real threat might be from offshore books like Bovada and MyBookie, and individual states aren't happy about this. 50 state attorneys have come together to urge the DOJ to act on these illegal books, as states stand to lose about $4 billion in tax revenue. And for the last item for today's playbook, let's talk about the U.S. Open. The USTA recently reported 2024 revenue of $623 million. Nearly 90% of this revenue is generated during a 2-week span at the US Open, with the USTA pulling in money from ticket sales, sponsorship, and hospitality, all of which recorded record highs last year. However, it's important to note that this money won't simply sit on the USDA's bank account. In addition to covering operational expenses, the USDA is planning a $90 million renovation at the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center, which will enhance the fan and player facilities. And speaking of the US Open, Yahoo Sports senior writer Dan Wolken is here to give us a rundown on everything happening on the ground in Queens. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start with Novak Djokovic. What is your sense for how he's playing at 38 years old, looking for his 25th major, but also how the crowd is reacting to him on campus?
Well, I think sometimes when you talk about these legendary athletes who've accomplished so much of their career, in some ways, this is the most interesting time in their entire career because they're clearly at the end. They don't have the athletic ability they once had. And so they have to survive on their smarts, on their guile, and they have to dig down deep. As Djokovic's doing that, he's done it all year. He doesn't play as much as he used to. He really only focuses now on the Grand Slams because the wear and tear of playing the regular tour is just really too much for him. And he gets to the later stages of these tournaments and his body does start to break down. And he's talked about how concerned he is about his physical state after every one of these matches. And he's got to play Carlos Alcaraz in the semifinals. I do think the New York crowd, as much as they love Alcaraz, is going to want to see a great match. They're going to want to see Djokovic at 38 give one last push to try to win a 25th major. And it'll just be fascinating theater to see him at this stage of his career and what he's actually got left in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, at 38 years old, going for your 25th, if you beat Fritz, Alcaraz, and then Sinner, that would be quite the lineup and quite the accomplishment for him. We'll see if he can do it. Secondly, Venus Williams. Venus Williams was in the doubles draw this year. She actually ended up making it pretty far to the quarterfinals. What is your sense of what that brought to the tournament this year?
I think all positives. You know, she's a very popular player. I think people really appreciate the chance to get to see her one more time. At this age, 45 years old, most of her peers are long gone from the sport. She's not competitive in singles in terms of winning a title or even winning a couple rounds, but she did represent herself very, very well. She lost a close singles match in the first round to Karolina Mukova, who's a fantastic player. Then she teamed up with Leylah Fernandez. They won a few doubles rounds. It was very exciting. It got a big crowd yesterday on Louis Armstrong Court for their match against the number 1 seeds, Taylor Townsend and Katerina Siniakova. So, yeah, I think all positives. And I think every tournament at this point on the women's tour, including the majors, would be thrilled to have Venus Williams in their draw, drawing fans, drawing into this.
Do you think the early exits for some of the American players has had any impact on the tournament? Obviously, Shelton's out, Paul's out, now Fritz is out, et cetera. Has that had any impact on sort of the fan experience?
I think at this point, it's been since 2003 that an American man has won a Grand Slam title. That was Andy Roddick here. And I think people at this point are just kind of used to the fact that Americans are not going to be around at the business end of the tournament. Last year, when Taylor Fritz made the final, I think it was a nice story, but I didn't get the sense that people were extremely like over the moon about it or anything. I do think somebody like Ben Shelton has a great chance to kind of reignite that passion that American fans feel, that patriotism for somebody to go and actually win a Grand Slam title. And I thought he had a really good shot this year. He's playing really well. Unfortunately for him, he got injured in the third round and wasn't able to continue on. And he's going to be a factor in the future. I think when you start talking about the U.S. Open over the next 5 years, like Ben Shelton is going to be one of those guys who in the second week is going to light everything on fire with the way he plays. And I think he will win one at some point. But I just think we've been through the Federer, the Nadal era, the Djokovic era. Now we're in the Sinner Alcaraz era. And I think real tennis fans, who are the kind of people who show up at these events, appreciate the greatness that they're seeing, American or not.
Yeah, 100%. It's just unfortunate with such a deep roster of American players now. They're just they can't crack through Sinner and Alcaraz, but we'll see what happens. Last question is just around the experience at the U.S. Open. I always tell people the U.S. Open is one of my favorite sports events. I imagine you've been to a lot yourself, being a sports writer. How do you rate the U.S. Open overall from a fan experience perspective?
Yeah, I tell people all the time. I think it's arguably the best sporting event in the United States to visit as a fan, because it's not just about the tennis. And obviously, you come the first week, you can get a grounds pass, you go to the outside courts, and you're seeing great players up close. I mean, you can be 5, 10 feet literally from the court, seeing just how good all of these professionals are. If you are here all day, great food and drink and concessions. It's a little bit pricey in terms of the concession experience, but a grounds pass, yeah, a couple $100. People complain about that because it maybe is a little higher than it used to be. But compare that to just, for instance, going to a Knicks game. You're going to pay that for an upper deck ticket for one basketball game. At a Grand Slam, you're here all day long watching incredible players, and you could stay literally from 11 in the morning till 11 at night. So I think it's one of the best values in American sports. I think it's an incredible experience. It's a big, loud, vivacious American sporting event. It's different from the other Grand Slams, but I do think it's got a lot of character. And I do recommend anybody to come here and see it if they can, tennis fan or not, because I do think they will have a wonderful experience.
100%. I totally agree with everything you said. I hope you're having a blast over there. And thank you so much for taking some time to join us today.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Now, we have to take a quick break, but coming back, we've got Sara Myer joining the show to discuss how major cities like Indianapolis are consistently securing some of the country's biggest sporting events. Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Sports Report. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. We've made it to the one-on-one, a conversation where I get to break down news and sports with a key player in the industry. This week, we're speaking with Sara Myer, Chief of Staff and Strategy at Indiana Sports Corp. Sara, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to just start really from the beginning. For people who have no idea what Indiana Sports Corp does, if you could just explain it to us, I think that would be helpful to start.
Yeah, I'd love to, and thanks for having me. So Indiana Sports Corp actually was the first ever sports commission created in the country. Indianapolis, back in the late 70s, was known as Indianapolis. That's what we were called because we were not a place to live, work, or play. And so our city leaders at the time said, we need a strategy around something to build up the city, and they built the strategy around sports. So the three pillars of that strategy was events, organizations, and venues. And so Indiana Sports Corp was created to really focus on that events pillar. So we are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is really to create impact through major sporting events. And so we bid against other cities to win events and host them. And then we work with the rights holder, whether that be the NCAA or USA Swimming or the WNBA WNBA, and we work with them to really be boots on the ground with everything from marketing and communications to logistics, transportation, athlete experience to really host the event here in the city. So there are now more than 300 sports commissions across the country. So there's a lot of competition out there. But that's why we really strive to take every event that we host to the next level. So it's a competitive business, but it's really fulfilling. We really try to make sure that any event that we bring here not only has economic impact, we obviously love to get media attention and build up the reputation of the city through it. But we're always trying to figure out, how do we engage the community? How did they feel like they're a part of the event? And then how do we really have an impact on youth and the community at large? How do we really leave a lasting legacy through these events? So it's not just something that comes into town and leaves. It has that lasting impact.
That was a perfect answer because you hit on a bunch of the things that I want to talk about.
Okay, great.
I think it's amazing, right, that you guys were the first and now there's 300. But I want to use Indianapolis as sort of an example to show people how this works across the country. One, because you guys were the first, but I also think you're doing it very well. You have obviously Lucas Oil Stadium, Gainbridge. You have a bunch of great events too, whether it's the Combine every year. You've hosted Super Bowls, Final Fours, the WNBA All-Star Game just came there, USA Swimming. Like there's a ton of stuff going on there. So I'd love to start, if you could just walk me through, like, you talked about bidding on some of these events, right? How does that process actually work? I'm assuming it starts several years in advance. You see something on the calendar, you're like, okay, this is an event, doesn't have a home yet. Let's go talk to them about what needs to be done. But if you can give us some specifics around sort of like what that process entails, that might be helpful.
Oh my gosh. I mean, do you remember how much you dreaded group projects when you were in school? Like, biggest group project ever. So really what happens is the rights holders put out an RFP for cities to bid on their events. And everyone does it differently. From the NFL to the NCAA, they all do it differently with their expectations around what they want to see. But then you work with your city leaders, your state leaders, your venues, your CVBs to make sure that you have everything that can make it possible to host the event. Now, we're also a very huge convention city. So we our number one stop before we even consider an event is to make sure we have enough hotel rooms. So, when people are always commenting about, oh, God, there's another hotel in this downtown, there's a very big strategy to that. There's a lot of the convention business and sports business are really fighting for the same weekend. So we always have to make sure that those are open. And then you really put your minds together to make sure you have all of the right specs for your venues, for everything that they need. But then also you get creative. How do you take the event to the next level? How do you make sure they know that Indianapolis is the place more than any other host city that is going to bring bigger attention than ever to your event, that are going to make the fans never forget what they experienced at your event? So you have to get creative. And sometimes it's wild because you are bidding so far in advance and you don't know what some of the fan experience, tactics will look like 5 or 7 years down the road. So a good example is the Final Four that we won for 2029. We won the men's in 2029. We bid on that in 2022. So to really imagine what our city would look like, we really had to work with leaders to see, okay, what construction might be happening? What is downtown going to look like? What are the amenities that we're able to offer now that don't exist at the present time? So you really got to get creative. And then sometimes it's a year process. With the NCAA, that's exactly what it is. They put the RFP out, they select the first round of cities, they come out to those cities to really make sure that you're not lying about what you're offering. They look at your venues, your hotels, all of your ancillary spaces. Then they have you present in person, and then they award the events. And so again, about a year process, and it's different for every event, but you have to bid it out early because then the planning starts.
How many other cities are you typically bidding against?
Oh, great question. I would say probably like 5 to 8. And typically, it depends on the venues that you have and the time of year as well. And I think that number of cities is just gonna grow. When you see cities that announce that they're building new venues, especially dome stadiums. So dome stadiums, that's the only way that you can host a men's Final Four is if you have a dome stadium. That's what they're going to go after. And they're going to go after some of these other events based on what the venue specs are. So I do anticipate that number to go up because there's so many new venues coming online.
Yeah, outside of Buffalo, it's become very popular to build dome stadiums now because of all the other things that you can do inside the stadium outside of NFL games. But you mentioned one thing that I thought was really interesting there, where you talked about getting creative. And if you think about some of these events, logistically, there's some like baseline requirements, I would imagine, right? The NFL is a good example with the Super Bowl, where you have to have a certain number of hotel rooms, you have to have a big enough airport, you have to have even things like golf courses and other stuff like that. But when it comes to the other side of that, which is incentivizing them to come there, I assume there's some situations where maybe they're given tax incentives or the use of police departments or different things like that, right? I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I'd be curious to know, how do you guys determine what things are likely to be included or you should include in those proposals?
Yeah, well, most events have a bid fee, so they're looking for some kind of investment. And a lot of states, we just recently got a state bid fund, which has been very helpful to getting us events. But there's other states that have had bid funds for a while, so that's something that a lot of events are expecting is a bid fee. But then, yes, you're offering the services of like your public safety. You are offering access to possible corporate partners. And so we always are listing who our corporate partners are in the city that might be able to help elevate the event. And then we kind of go overboard with some of our ideas too, like with swimming. I mean, the Eiffel Tower, we did a replica 66-foot Eiffel Tower downtown. That was part of our bid, and we really wanted to wow them with something. I think they thought we were crazy at first, but we managed to do it and pull it off. And that's just because it's something that, is going to bring attention to the event and is going to make it a thing that people have to go to. They have to see it.
I love it. So obviously the benefit of all of this is spending. People come in the area and they spend. And I think one of the things that people commonly mistake around this is that net new tax revenue is what's really helpful here, right? It's people traveling in from outside the city. If you're inside the city, maybe you have a budget and people are going to be spending that money on a different business inside the city. But with a Final Four or a Super Bowl or something like that, people are traveling in. It's new money inside the city, obviously hugely helpful. And I imagine it's something that you guys closely monitor. One of the things I'd like to ask about is the economic impact, right? And over time, what I've realized is that economic impact used to be taken as a fact when a organization, a city, whatever, would put it out. Now people are a little bit more skeptical of it, saying, how was this calculated, et cetera. What are you guys doing on that side to ensure that you're really getting accurate numbers?
Yeah, we really do. We actually have a staff member who it's not her sole focus, but a big part of her focus is economic impact reporting. So she's constantly working with our partners, our event partners, the hotels, the restaurants, just to make sure that we're getting accurate numbers as we're really putting together that data. Because you're right. You're like, how do we just believe these numbers that come out? But it does take a while. And it's why you don't really hear some of the economic impact numbers for a couple of months afterwards, because it's so much data that you have to gather and you want to make sure that it's accurate. And it is a detailed process and one that we continue to do because it's important in not only, trying to get the event back, but getting new events.
We talked a second ago about the WNBA All-Star Game as one of the events that I mentioned. That was obviously just hosted in Indianapolis. The city has sort of been supercharged, it feels like, from the outside looking in, with Caitlin Clark arriving there a couple of years ago. What was that event like? And are there any data points that you found interesting that you could share with us?
That event was wild. I mean, it's so funny because you think about something a year ago, like a swim trials, which was like so high competition. And these athletes are trying to, go to be on Team USA. And then you have WNBA All Star where like the athletes are like, let's have a good time. Like it was such an amazing celebration of women's sports. And honestly, to see the sponsors come out too. I mean, with you were downtown in Indy, Gatorade and Nike and all Coach, all of these sponsors just put signage everywhere. I mean, they were coming out for women's sports and it was just so apparent. Good Morning America was here. It was wild. So I think it just showed the WNBA as an organization what a great host city we are, because we found out about we got the event in August of 2024, so we didn't have a ton of time to plan, but we were still able to, take it to that next level and make a great experience for the athletes. And I think that's a huge part of it too, was not just the experience of the athletes. I mean, they got to come in, our airport was decked out. They were seeing themselves on all the signage. Like it was a true celebration of them, but a true celebration of women and girls in sports. And, you've heard, girls who play sports become women who lead. I think that's so so, I mean, so special right now. And just the momentum of these girls seeing these women on this stage. And data wise, we haven't gotten the economic impact numbers back, but I think just so much of the data that just the Fever have told us about. I mean, this last season, they've had 50 states represented in 44 countries from the fan base that has come to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. They have a 20+ person social team, and they post probably, I think they said around 14 times per day. That is wild. I mean, the amount of content that is coming out of this, and and again, going back to the sponsors too that are showing up for women's sports and showing up for the Fever here. It's great to see, and I'm excited for the future of it all.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see how much the Fever, but also the city have invested in the team and how much it's grown. But thanks so much for joining us today, Sara.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, the clock is winding down here, but we have just enough time for some final buzz. So let's talk about NFL tickets and what teams are leaving the most money on the table. A new study by ticket comparison site Ticket Compare reveals a startling truth. The Kansas City Chiefs, despite being one of the NFL's most successful teams, lose more revenue due to unsold seats than any other NFL franchise. In the 2024 season, Arrowhead Stadium averaged just 55,195 attendees per game, leaving roughly 21,000 seats empty in a 76,000 seat venue. If you multiply that by the average ticket price of $102, this amounts to an estimated $2.16 million lost per home game. Trailing far behind are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who lose approximately $803,000 per game, with an average of 11,300 empty seats at $95 per ticket. In third place, the Las Vegas Raiders lose around $686,000 per game, driven by their high average ticket price of $243, despite having just 2,825 empty seats. And rounding out the top five are the Minnesota Vikings and Green Bay Packers, each losing $590,000 and $575,000 respectively, from thousands of vacant seats multiplied by their average ticket price. Now, at the other end of the extreme, the Seattle Seahawks experienced minimal losses, only about $10,000 per game from around 80 empty seats. The Cleveland Browns, Detroit Lions, Los Angeles Chargers, and Jacksonville Jaguars also reside at the low end of the spectrum, with losses ranging from approximately $15,000 to $100,000 per game. So, the takeaway is simple. Even dominant teams like the Chiefs, bolstered by superstar appearances and strong fan enthusiasm, face massive financial consequences when their stadiums aren't full. We're all out of time, so it's officially game over for this week. Thank you so much to Dan, Sara, and all of you for joining us. Please make sure to scan the QR code below to follow Yahoo Finance Podcast for more videos and expert insights. And catch us every Friday wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. See you next time.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.